All right, so I'm on my way to buy another tree, and I don't really have a lot of room, but I have started selling off some of my plant collection to make room on the patio, and this is the last tree I'm buying, at least for now. But I saw it last weekend, and I've been kind of thinking it over, and I really kind of want to get this tree to kind of, mess around with it a little bit and see what I can do. Now, it's not a particularly great tree in terms of branch structure. It's kind of all messed up and all over the place. The potential to turn it into a normal bonsai tree isn't even really there. But when I looked at this tree, something about it just kind of spoke to me. I kind of knew, okay, there's something in there that we can kind of, cut these branches off, pull this down, move it around. There's something we can create out of this tree. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized I can probably style this in a very naturalistic type of way, mirroring the style or growth habit and shape of pine trees or certain species of pine trees in the wild. Now, thankfully, I have this grove of, I believe they're red pines, growing close by where I work. So I have a video clip of those, which I'm going to show to kind of, demonstrate what I'm styling this after. And when we get to the nursery, I'm going to record the tree. And of course, when I bring it back to my house, I'm going to kind of show you what my plan is and probably just style it all today. And we're going to be making this kind of very narrow columnar type of pine, mimicking some stuff in the wild. So first of all, let's go take a look at this tree and see exactly what we have to work with. All right, so here we are at a classic location, the Hidden Gardens, and I've got some videos of this place that I'm going to upload, but I figured, you know what, just walking back there to pick up a pine tree really isn't too much of an ordeal to record, but I have the tree in my car now, and so we're going to go home today and just see what we can turn this into. Okay, so here we are near my workplace where there is a grove of these pine trees. And I'm not sure if this is red pine or some other type of pine, but that doesn't really matter. The important thing is that there are these pine trees that grow in the wild that have more of an apex of foliage and kind of a bare trunk all the way down. Or if there is more foliage, it's still very columnar in shape. So if we want to replicate this, and Bonsai is styling a tree to look like a dwarf representation of something that is found in the wild, we're going to have to bend the rules a little bit, and we're not going to have that traditional first branch, second branch, but I have so many trees, I figured for this one, what I want to do is kind of do something a little bit different, a little bit unusual. So coming up here, we have a little page about the lodgepole pine, which is what mine allegedly is. And as you can see on the very right there, naturally a mature lodgepole pine has that very thin, narrow, columnar shape to it. So this is pretty much what I'm going after. All right, so here we have this alleged lodgepole pine that I bought. It came with no tag, just pine tree, bonsai, and the owner said it's a lodgepole. I'm going to have to go on his word because I don't really know how to tell them apart, especially in a dwarf form without any cones on it. So theoretically, it's a lodgepole. So if you take a look at this tree, you can see the shape that it has with the existing branches is very bizarre. And first thing I should probably do is prop it up here in the back to kind of get the tree straight up and down, or as close to it as I can, because that's how it's going to be styled. So here we have it propped up, and now let's talk a little bit about how the layout of the branches is like on this tree. All right, so you can see here we've got some small branches down at the beginning of the base of this tree, and we have this gigantic one kind of coming out to the side here. Another one here, kind of smaller sized. These are kind of surprisingly malleable. Then we have this clump of smaller branches kind of in the middle of this tree. And then of course we have the apex where the branches have elongated a little bit, and it's going to be interesting to style this because we can't really, you know, lay this down as a first branch. Well, I mean, I guess we could, but then in terms of a second branch, this one is right across from it, so that won't work, which only leaves us with the smaller ones over here to regrow a whole branch, which isn't really optimal. But none of that really matters because we're going to be styling it, focusing mainly only on the apex. We're going to cut all this other stuff off, and I was told don't cut off the majority of the foliage, that will cause the tree to lose energy. But with the size of this pot and the thinness of the trunk, I believe if we leave, you know, half of the foliage on here, that's going to be good enough. We'll place it in the full sun, we'll protect it over the winter, and I really wanted to just go ahead and chop this and style it in this video. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first things first, we're going to have to cut off pretty much the majority of these bottom branches. So I'll just get these loppers and just do that right now. Alright, so here I'm going to cut off the majority of the branches on the bottom of the tree. Now, if you wanted to style this tree in a different way, you could probably keep them and style it, you know, grow out a first branch, second branch, something like that. But for this particular project, they're really not useful, so eventually 2/3 of the foliage on this tree is just going to be chopped off because I don't really need it or want it for the vision that I have. Alright, so for a second here, I was thinking maybe we should keep this. If we wire this down like this, that's almost like a traditional first branch. And you take some of these and you wire them kind of to the middle here. We have that triangle shape starting to form. But that's still, you know, kind of trying to adjust this to a more typical looking bonsai tree, kind of more classical shape. And for this specimen, this is just the wrong way, in my opinion, to take this styling, and it will just be more of a detriment to the final idea I had in mind, rather than an asset.
Alright, so before we cut anything else off, I had the idea to leave the foliage kind of here, maybe, to kind of have this diamond of foliage forming. But I really want this branch to be wired downwards, and this is just going to be crossing over and interrupting this main first branch that I want to use. So everything kind of beneath my hand here, that's all going to be cut off. I really don't need that for the final styling of this tree. Alright, so pretty basic explanation for this one. I'm just going to go ahead and chop off all of those branches in the center of this tree. And like I said, I'm keeping a little bit of a stump because we might turn some of that into deadwood features later on. Alright, so now that's opened up, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and wire this into place because this is almost like a defining branch, and then we can kind of style around this one. So I'm going to go ahead, grab the wire, and wire this up. Alright, so that bottom branch is still there, and I feel like I should have just cut that off to get it out of my way, but it doesn't really matter. What we're going to do is we're going to take this branch and wire it into place where I want it, and then kind of look if we can leave that first branch to thicken up the trunk or not. Eventually, I mean, I'm recording this after the fact, so I'm gonna end up cutting that branch off anyways. But right here, I wired it into place. That wire was kind of not strong enough, so what I ended up doing was getting another piece of wire, tying it from the branch wire to the trunk wire, and just tightening that up to pull that branch towards the trunk and give this tree kind of a more narrow columnar shape like we're going after. I didn't want that branch sticking out at all, and it is still, even in my opinion, a little bit too far where it is right now, but hopefully we'll pull that back with the years to come, and we'll keep pruning it. Hopefully we'll get good bud back, and we'll have a more narrow columnar shape with this tree. Then I went ahead and I went on the other side and did pretty much the exact same thing. Alright, so here we are almost done with the final styling of this tree for today. And there's just some branches in the back, which I was debating if I should keep or not, and then just some foliage up top that I wanted to cut back a little bit to keep it closer to the trunk. And so what I eventually end up deciding is that I do want to cut off that back branch because it's just not really useful for the final style.
Alright, so I had a branch kind of back here that I was uncertain about, and I feel like it provides some depth to this tree. I want to wire this one down a little bit, but this one can kind of be brought back here to make one foliage pad with this. But then, of course, we kind of have stuff visually crossing back here if we pull this forward. So I think the best option is just going to be to cut this one off and wire this down to kind of be a continuation of that foliage and have some depth back here anyways. So I'll go ahead and cut this one off. And we actually have a lot more of these deadwood stumps down here than I thought would be useful. We're probably not going to keep them all, but at least we have that option there for now. The biggest thing is I want to keep trimming some of this back to make it a little bit tighter, and then we'll wire this branch, and I think that's almost it for today. There's not a whole lot I want to do on this tree, other than the initial styling, and we'll kind of see how it grows through the years and how it can kind of fill out this narrow column that we have. So let me go ahead and wire this branch and see if there's anything else that I missed.
Okay, so what I'm going to do next is take this branch and kind of wire it to be in line with this triangle that I'm forming here. And it's a really rough shaping and the wiring is kind of sloppy, I will admit that. But my philosophy is as long as it's kind of in line with the rough shape that I want, I can always refine it later on. Alright, so I'm just going to show this process on one branch, this bottom main branch. To create deadwood features, what I did was I just took my pliers and started ripping off the bark. And since this branch was alive this morning, it had green foliage on it, all that bark is very fresh and soft and moist. So all I had to do was kind of just pinch it at the end until it cracked a little bit, grab it and peel it off. What I did with my pocket knife was I kind of cut around the base of the branch near the trunk so that when I was ripping the bark off, it didn't rip off onto the trunk. And this method worked pretty well, and I kind of, pinched the tips of the branch a little bit and peeled that off to create kind of a more sharper tip to some of this deadwood. And that's pretty much what I'm going to do for every single branch up this tree to create our multiple deadwood features. Alright, so here is what I have at the end of today's styling. And it's not super refined, obviously. Hopefully we'll get some nice bud back in the branches here. We'll kind of see how that does over the next year. We kind of repotted it to straighten it out. We have the deadwood, which I left. I'm not going to lime sulfur it because I want all of this bark that's kind of in the cracks here to weather away and fall off, and then we'll probably preserve it with lime sulfur once it's all nice and bare and eroded. And then as for the foliage, we have it, kind of how we have it wired here. I would prefer it to be a little bit more narrow and columnar. But we'll kind of see how this reacts. We'll probably cut this branch back next year if we get some good back budding and just work with the foliage we have back here. But in terms of, just taking the risk and chopping off all the foliage, I'm pretty satisfied with how this turned out. It's definitely going in the direction of that wild red pine, wild lodgepole pine vision that I have. So yeah, this is the final product, and I guess I'll just do a 360 of it. It doesn't really matter. I mean, this is the view, the single front view that is the most important one. And then sort of the depth of the tree we'll just have to refine later. We're going to have to work with how this tree grows with these kind of strange, stiff and long branches that it grows. But this is what I have for right now, so hope you enjoyed that. Hit the subscribe button down below to be notified when I make a new video, and I will be back soon with some more bonsai tree content.